and to discuss the ramifications of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict and the statements that are coming from both sides, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, Europe, EU and President Trump. We're going to discuss all of that, and very glad to have on the show Air Marshal Sanjeev Kapoor, former Director General Inspection and Safety from Indian Air Force. Thank you very much, Air Marshal Kapoor. Such a pleasure talking to you, sir. And also welcoming from all the way from Moscow, Fred Weir is a senior, very senior journalist, has covered Russia and formerly Soviet Union for many decades, and writes on geopolitics, particularly on developments in Russia. Thank you, Fred. As always, honor to have you on the show. I'm going to start with Air Marshal Kapoor. Well, we know that President Trump has warned Zelensky that he better move fast to negotiate an end to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or risk not having a nation to lead. And the kind of war of words that this has unleashed from both sides. If you could just to begin with decode, what does President Trump mean when he says that risk or not having a nation or risk not having a nation? Well, if you remember correctly, he wanted to play a constructive role as a mediator and put a full stop to the war, quote unquote. But what is happening?
Somewhere the Americans have realized that they have pumped in $350 billion. For our Indian viewers, if I put it in the money of Indian currency, 32 lakh crore rupees have been pushed in by the European Union and America in this war, of which 18 lakh crore rupees have been spent by America alone, and Europe's contribution has been just 14 lakh crores. So the first issue which President Trump is having is that this is a European war. What has America got to do by pumping in more and more money? And second issue which I feel has emerged now is Ukraine is at its weakest point at this stage. The 4.5 hour meeting that went along indicates that Russia was speaking from a position of strength. The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, body language when he was dealing with the American leadership at Riyadh day before is something which the geopolitical leaders would be watching. And after 4.5 hours of negotiation, the Americans have left that room that they come back. On 12th, the US president called up President Putin, and there's a likely meet, probably the analysts are saying, by end of this month between Trump and Putin, wherein the final modalities of withdrawal would be discussed.
Okay, Fred, this one is for you. Now, Kremlin has branded Starmer's troops' plan as unacceptable and has also backed in the same breath Trump's criticism of Zelensky. British troops on the ground, do you think adding will kind of add another dimension to the ongoing war and deepen the bloc politics?
I think the basic thing we have to keep in mind here is that Ukraine has pretty comprehensively lost the war. I follow the news every day on multiple Telegram channels, and Russian troops are pressing forward across the entire 1,000-kilometer long front. And there is political crisis in Kiev, not simply because of the American 180-degree turn, but because it's increasingly obvious that the war is lost. So that is what's driving the haste on Trump's part, I think, to get this over with, to frame a peace agreement that will be his personal triumph, because he's very much that kind of guy. And he does not want to have to own Ukrainian defeat. He wants to blame that on Biden and get the war over with on his terms. But the reason that Washington is making all these supposed concessions to Moscow is because they're just trying to get ahead of reality. The war is lost. So Trump I mean, Trump has made a 180-degree turn in a lot of ways, and it's also his
You're saying
style.
180-degree turn, not 360.
Yeah, no, 180. It looks like a pretty full turnabout. But he also uses a completely different style, very unfamiliar and an unpleasant style of diplomacy.
Okay.
It's what, when the wrestling match is taking place, a guy comes out, the tout comes out and trash talks. We're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. He's like that, and this is very, very grates on the ears of all educated people, me included. But it's his style, and he's doing that. Force Zelensky into a corner and accept his terms.
Okay, so I would want to add another supplementary question to this, Fred. So do you think President Putin has pushed this narrative too hard, this narrative of delegitimizing Zelensky, despite the Russian leader's invasion of Ukraine, preventing it from holding elections? The whole question over President Zelensky not holding office is technically incorrect. Do you think this narrative is actually holding any ground? Fred?
Well, this narrative belongs to the world of just over a week ago. I think the Russians are. I've tried to follow what Putin is saying about this, but he has said lately that he will talk to Zelensky. And it is going to be a problem because I think Zelensky's seat in Kiev is very insecure right now, not just because of the attacks coming from two sides, from the United States now and Moscow, but I think Zelensky's enemies at home are plotting against him, and there's some sign in these telegram channels that there is unrest in the Ukrainian military and in ultranationalist forces in Ukraine. Zelensky could be unseated. And that would create crisis of legitimacy on a big scale. So I think, yes, the Russians probably wish there was someone that they could talk to in Kiev, and that someone.
But Ukraine would not want to see Marshal Kapoor crisis of legitimacy at this juncture when they have seen so much of bloodshed. Despite the other narrative about President Zelensky's dwindling popularity, how do you put this together, Marshal Kapoor?
See, the official figure is 150,000 dead, but unofficial figure puts the figure over 4 lakh people have died in this conflict. Now, what has emerged in these few days is that Russia has occupied about 20% of Ukrainian territory. Just note, Russia has occupied around 20% of Ukrainian territory. Zelensky, who was to face elections in his country, has refused to do that. So one of the demands on this table in this 4.5-hour meeting was that there should be elections in Ukraine, and the Russian Federation would like to speak to the new elected government to work out the peace deal. Now, how much will this fructify? And the proposal by France and a couple of other countries from Europe, wherein they said, Poland, that we will make a team, peacekeeping team, and we will send to Ukraine to help Ukrainians from the EU side in case the Americans are not coming, was not accepted by rest of the EU countries. Even the UK and the other countries outrightly refused this proposal, wherein they don't want to, the EU in no way wants to get into this conflict. So now, as it appears today, Ukraine has lost a lot of its troops. Zelensky's popularity.
No, but EU doesn't want to come into the conflict, Marshal Kapoor. But EU is, strongly backing Zelensky, saying that it is Ukraine which is democracy, and Putin's Russia, quote unquote, is no democracy.
So this was the premises by which this conflict began over 3 years ago. So they cannot change the stance to say that we are restoring the democracy. Where has the proposal of Ukraine joining NATO gone now? Now, nobody is talking about it. The NATO has outrightly said that we will not accept Ukraine as a NATO member. And this was the point which began this conflict 3 years ago.
Okay, Fred, can you come in here? Now, Trump, we've seen President Trump has never criticized President Putin. Well, in the recent past, President Putin has been at the helm undisputedly since 2000 through an electoral process that, many reports like Freedom House's assessment, they rate it very low, and there are questions on the freedom and fairness of Putin's election, etc. Since you've covered it so extensively, you think this is a fair comparison because now it's the President Putin who first wants to talk to a legitimate government in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, I think Putin is the legitimate leader of Russia.
Okay, of course.
You can. I mean, I have written extensively on this, and the quality and depth of Russian democracy. There are immense problems with it, but there is absolutely no doubt about who runs this country and does so pretty much with a total control, and with the support of the Russian people. That's just obvious. So I think the question about how democratic Russia is should be left to another time and another forum.
Okay.
But as for Ukraine, it's a country at war, and Zelensky is a beleaguered leader. His mandate has famously run out, but it's under martial law, and it's taken a lot of steps, as countries in a desperate situation often do, which are completely undemocratic. It's banned the opposition. It's created one big government-controlled media outlet, and sidelined all the others. I could go on, but it's hard to question, to my mind, to question Zelensky's legitimacy, because he is the only elected leader of Ukraine who is in place, and holding elections in the chaotic conditions that exist right now would probably be impractical. So I think everybody's got to come around to accepting Zelensky as an interlocutor in these peace talks. Okay.
Now, I have two final questions. In fact, one final question divided into two parts. I'm going to start with Marshal Kapoor. So, who really holds the cards of ending this war? Is it Russia? And is there an opportunity of sorts for Moscow here? It kind of recognizes the growing rift between Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, and it can make a case out of it? Like, you have Russia and US on one side and Ukraine on the other.
See, for the first time after 1945, I am seeing Americans and Russians on the same side.
Yes.
The Russians are wanting their old position back, be it in the G7, be it removal of sanctions, be it embargoes which have been put on them, and they want to negotiate from a position of strength, wherein they have achieved. And America, on the other hand, is asking Ukraine for rare minerals, which the Americans are telling Zelensky that you must pay us because we have spent so much of money to fight for you, over $200 billion. So what has America got in return? So some may call it extortion, some may call it business sense, but these are kind of things which were non-heard of till President Trump took over on 20th of January.
Fred, how do you see this? Russia and US on one side, Ukraine backed by EU on the other side. Like, can we see the end to all of this, and who holds the key here?
Well, clearly, the United States and Russia, if they come to some kind of an agreement between themselves, a blueprint for peace, it's going to be pretty hard for anyone, Ukraine or the EU, to oppose it. And as we've seen in those 2 days of meetings in Paris, the selected group of EU leaders couldn't agree on much of anything at all. They are actually, their disarray is as much a signal to Kiev that it's over as Trump's really nasty tweets are. So I think that in the fullness of time, Putin and Trump will meet. Hopefully they will agree on a fair blueprint that preserves an independent Ukraine. Maybe it will be neutral. Of course, it will be neutral, but maybe it will be sort of in the Russian sphere of influence. But Ukraine should be preserved as a viable sovereign state. I think Putin agrees with that. I mean, I talked to many Russian experts who are close to the Kremlin, and they say they don't mind the existence of it just can't be in NATO or a Western Trojan horse state in their region. So I think I'm optimistic that Russia and the United States can put an end to this maybe within the next few months.
Okay, on that very optimistic note, that we get to see the end to this more than 2 years long war, which has seen so much of bloodshed from both sides, finally come to an end. Thank you very much, Fred Weir. It's such a pleasure. Thank you for taking out time. It's early morning out there. I should have said good morning to you, but anyway, have a very good day. And thank you very much for joining. And Air Marshal Kapoor, thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.